Thomas Dexter Jakes, known today as T.D. Jakes, entered the world on June 9, 1957, in South Charleston, West Virginia. His childhood was far from glamorous. Raised in a modest African American family during a period of social and cultural shifts in mid 20th century America, he learned early the values of perseverance and faith. His father, Ernest Jakes Sr., was an industrious man who owned a janitorial business, instilling in his children the ethic of hard work. His mother, Odith, was a strong and nurturing figure who emphasized education and resilience. The family's world was turned upside down when his father fell ill and eventually passed away, leaving a young Thomas to grapple with grief and responsibility. Finding his voice, early struggles, and the seeds of compassion. Adding to these challenges, Jakes battled a speech impediment that caused him to feel isolated among his peers. Words, which would one day become his greatest instrument, often betrayed him in childhood. Yet instead of silencing his potential, this difficulty trained him in empathy, resilience, and creativity. He grew up aware of the struggles of those who felt overlooked or underestimated, shaping the compassion that would later permeate his ministry. To help support his family, Jakes worked odd jobs while also pursuing education and nurturing a quiet but unshakable faith. He often found himself drawn to the Bible, sensing even as a young man that his calling would eventually involve teaching and guiding others. His earliest attempts at preaching took place not in cathedrals or auditoriums, but in small storefronts and humble settings, spaces where sincerity mattered more than polish. These beginnings forged in him a deep identification with ordinary people who carried extraordinary burdens. It was here, in the hills of West Virginia, that Jakes first began to see brokenness not as an end, but as the raw material from which God could shape purpose, building a ministry from scratch. The 1980s proved to be a defining decade for Jakes. Determined to follow the call he felt burning within him, he began pastoring a small congregation in Montgomery, West Virginia. That church, initially numbering fewer than a dozen people, bore little resemblance to the massive congregation he would later lead in Dallas. Yet it was here that his vision for ministry was planted. Unlike larger, more established churches that often maintained a polished distance from the raw struggles of life, Jakes's ministry was built on honesty, transparency, and a willingness to tackle subjects others avoided. He preached about pain, loss, abuse, and identity. He shared his own vulnerabilities and hardships, building trust with congregants who sensed he was not speaking down to them but walking alongside them. Week after week, he poured his heart into sermons, counseling sessions, and prayer meetings. The church grew slowly, fueled by word of mouth as people testified about the authenticity and hope they encountered in his messages. Invitations to speak at conferences and other churches followed, and soon Jakes found himself with a growing reputation as a preacher, with a rare to combine biblical truth with emotional depth. During this period, he honed his preaching style, a blend of poetic cadence, prophetic urgency, and pastoral care. His once hesitant voice became a booming, commanding instrument capable of moving listeners to tears or laughter within minutes. In these early years, Jakes was not merely building a church, he was shaping a unique voice in American Christianity, one that would soon be amplified on national and global stages. Breakthrough, woman, thou art loosed. Every influential leader has a breakthrough moment, and for Jakes, it came in the early 1990s with Woman, Thou Art Loosed. Originally a sermon series addressing the wounds and struggles of women who had endured abuse, broken relationships, or neglect, the message resonated far beyond its initial audience. What began as a heartfelt attempt to speak healing to hurting women transformed into a movement. Jakes turned the sermons into a book, which quickly became a bestseller. Conferences followed, drawing thousands of women from across the nation who longed to hear words of hope, restoration, and empowerment. The message was both spiritual and practical. Brokenness does not disqualify a person from healing or destiny. This struck a chord in communities where women often carried silent pain and generational wounds. The success of Woman, Thou Art Loosed extended beyond the church. It was adapted into a stage play and later a film, allowing Jake's message to reach audiences who may never attend a worship service. Through these mediums, he demonstrated a gift for blending faith with culture, offering healing in language and formats that transcended religious boundaries. This breakthrough elevated Jakes from a regional preacher to a national figure. He was no longer just pastoring a local congregation. He had become a voice for millions, particularly women who had long felt overlooked by both society and traditional religious institutions. The movement also cemented his reputation as a communicator who could connect biblical truths to real human struggles in ways that felt both accessible and transformative. Moving to Dallas, the birth of the Potter's House. By the mid-1990s, Jakes's influence had grown so significantly that a larger stage was inevitable. He relocated his ministry to Dallas, Texas, and founded the Potter's House in 1996. What began as a vision quickly grew into one of the most dynamic megachurches in the United States. The Potter's House was more than a church building. It was a community hub designed to meet spiritual, cultural, and practical needs. With state-of-the-art facilities and a vision for outreach, the church soon attracted tens of thousands of members. Under Jakes's leadership, it became known for blending passionate worship with social engagement, creating a model of ministry that resonated with people across generations and backgrounds. Membership swelled to more than 30,000, and millions more connected through televised broadcasts, online platforms, and international conferences. Jakes's sermons were now reaching living rooms around the world, bridging cultural divides and drawing people into a faith experience that felt both ancient and modern. In Dallas, Jake's vision expanded from preaching to creating an institution capable of addressing diverse human needs. The Potter's House developed programs for education, economic empowerment, family restoration, and community development, demonstrating that ministry was not limited to Sunday mornings. This holistic approach reflected Jake's belief that faith must touch every area of life: spiritual, emotional, financial, and social. Expanding influence, media, books, and film. One of the hallmarks of Jake's career has been his ability to extend ministry beyond traditional boundaries. His voice was not confined to the pulpit. It echoed through books, films, and media ventures. As an author, Jakes penned numerous bestsellers covering topics such as leadership, faith, relationships, and personal growth. Books like He Motions, Reposition Yourself, and Instinct offered practical wisdom grounded in spiritual insight, appealing not only to churchgoers but also to readers in the broader marketplace. His writing style mirrored his preaching, accessible, heartfelt, and filled with vivid imagery. In film, Jakes took bold steps into Hollywood, producing adaptations of Woman, Thou Art Loosed, and later Jumping the Broom and Miracles from Heaven. These projects were more than entertainment. They were vehicles for values of healing, reconciliation, and love. By entering the world of mainstream cinema, Jakes positioned himself as a cultural architect, showing that faith-based storytelling could resonate in spaces far beyond the sanctuary. Through media, Jakes effectively bridged gaps between sacred and secular, proving that messages of hope and redemption could thrive in diverse contexts. His ventures paved the way for other faith leaders to explore creative platforms while maintaining integrity and purpose. The role of a cultural leader. By the early 2000s, Jakes was more than a pastor. He was a cultural leader. His influence reached political figures, celebrities, and global organizations. Presidents invited him to prayer gatherings, civic leaders sought his counsel, and his conferences became international events. One of his signature gatherings, MegaFest, drew tens of thousands of attendees from around the world. These events combined worship, entertainment, and empowerment sessions, creating an atmosphere that blurred the lines between church revival and cultural festival. In doing so, Jakes redefined what large-scale ministry could look like in the 21st century. As a cultural leader, he engaged in national conversations about race, community development, and spirituality. While some leaders confined themselves to the pulpit, Jakes navigated boardrooms, media interviews, and public forums with equal ease. His presence in these spaces underscored the respect he commanded and the broad relevance of his voice. A theology of healing and empowerment. Central to Jakes' enduring appeal is his theology. While deeply rooted in Pentecostal tradition, his messages emphasize healing, restoration, and empowerment rather than divisive doctrinal debates. He often draws from the biblical image of the potter and the clay, teaching that God shapes broken lives into vessels of purpose. This metaphor not only inspired the name of his church, but also encapsulated his ministry philosophy. Brokenness is not the end, but the beginning of transformation. Jake speaks to those who feel marginalized, women, minorities, the wounded, and the overlooked, reminding them that their pain can be the soil from which destiny grows. His sermons blend biblical storytelling with practical application, making ancient texts come alive for modern listeners. For many, his voice has been a source of courage during seasons of hardship, challenges, and criticisms along the way. Like any leader of great influence, Jakes has not been without critics. Some question the megachurch model, arguing that it risks creating distance between pastors and congregants. Others scrutinized his cautious stances on social issues, debating whether his diplomacy represented wisdom or evasion. He has also faced the pressures of balancing spiritual leadership with the demands of business, media, and public life. Yet through it all, Jakes has emphasized his commitment to preaching healing and unity over division. His resilience in the face of scrutiny reflects his ability to adapt without losing sight of his mission, legacy of service, and global impact. Assessing. Jake's legacy requires looking beyond statistics and headlines to the countless lives transformed through his work. From small storefront churches in West Virginia to the vast reach of the Potter's House, his journey is a testimony to perseverance, faith, and vision. His impact can be seen in the women empowered through Woman, Thou Art Loosed, the communities strengthened by outreach initiatives, the leaders mentored under his guidance, and the families restored through his counseling and conferences. His books and films have also sparked conversations about faith in mainstream culture, extending his influence far beyond church walls. The enduring message of T.D. Jakes. At the heart of Jake's story is a simple yet profound message. Brokenness is not final. Time and again, his ministry has returned to the theme that God reshapes fractured lives into vessels of strength and beauty. This truth has resonated across cultures and generations, making his influence enduring. As he reflects on decades of ministry, Jakes continues to embody the principle that true legacy is measured not by audience size, but by the depth of lives changed. His journey challenges future leaders to pair authenticity with vision, humility with influence, and faith with action. Conclusion: a legacy beyond the stage. The life of T. Jakes is not merely the biography of a preacher who built a megachurch. It is the story of a boy who once struggled to speak but grew into a man whose voice now echoes across nations. His journey illustrates resilience in the face of hardship, courage in the pursuit of calling, and wisdom in navigating the complexities of modern ministry. What makes his legacy remarkable is not only the size of his congregation or the reach of his media projects, but the constancy of his message. Wounds can heal, mistakes do not disqualify, and God delights in reshaping fragile clay into something beautiful. Through sermons, books, conferences, and films, his voice has become a bridge, connecting pain to hope, despair to faith, and brokenness to destiny. Though his story is still unfolding, T.D. Jakes has already left an indelible mark on faith, culture, and leadership. His life reminds us that influence is not about fame, but about service, and that true greatness lies in lifting others toward healing and purpose.